Welcome to East Wargaming. We're here today with another battle report for you. I'm Richard, and once again, it's a pleasure to welcome Jason.
Hello, everybody.
So today we're bringing you the Dark Angels versus the Deathguard in a 2,500 point game. What game are we actually playing today?
Well, we've looked at the Siege of Cathonia book, and we looked at the missions in the book, and I think we were a bit unhappy and kind of confused why they're only 4 turns long. But we'll get to that in a separate video, I think. So we decided to actually use one of the Goonhammer missions. We're big fans of the Goonhammer missions. It's something different. They seem to be really, really well laid out. And we're playing the one that's called Supply Drop.
Yeah. So we rolled off. Jason won the roll, so he is the attacker. So Deathguard will be attacking. Dark Angels will be defending. It should be exciting. We're on some new terrain as well today, as you'll see. We've worked in conjunction with Scrapscapes KL, so they've supplied us with the terrain today. And hope you enjoy it, and we'll see you in the post-game.
Today we have 2,500 points of Traitor Deathguard running the Creeping Death Rite of War. In the HQ slot, for the first choice, we have Callous Typhon. He's completely stock, but with him is a retinue of 3 Deathshroud Terminators. One has been upgraded to carry a Legion Standard, marked by the Penguin, and his power weapon is a Power Maul. For a dedicated transport, they have a Land Raider Proteus, which has been upgraded with searchlights. In the second HQ choice, and a requirement for the Rite of War, we have a Centurion who's been upgraded to be a Siegebreaker. He is completely bone stock, with the exception of a Nemesis Bolter. In the Elite's choice, we have a Contemptor Dreadnought Talon, consisting of 2 Contemptors. One has been upgraded to wield dual las cannons, while the other has dual fists, each with an inbuilt grav gun. For the first troops choice, we have a 10-man Breacher Squad. The Sergeants have been upgraded with a Power Fist and Artificer Armor, and 2 of the Breachers have been upgraded to carry grav guns. For the second and third troops choices, we have 2 identical 11-man Tactical Squads. The Sergeants in each have been upgraded with Artificer Armor and a Power Fist, and 1 Marine in each squad has been upgraded to carry a Vexilla, marked by the spiked skull on the backpacks. For the first heavy support choice, we have a 10-man heavy support squad, this one with missile launchers. One has been upgraded to carry a Vexilla, the other has been upgraded to carry an Augury Scanner, and the Sergeant is in Artificer Armor. For the second heavy support choice, we have another 10-man heavy support squad. This one is armed with Volkite Culverins. It also has 1 upgraded with a Vexilla and 1 upgraded with an Augury Scanner and Artificer Armor on the Sergeant. And for the final heavy support choice and rounding out the army, we have a Leviathan. He is stocked with the exception of a Leviathan Storm Cannon and a Phosphex Discharger, but otherwise retains his standard weaponry. Together, this represents 2,500 points of Traitor Deathguard running the Creeping Death Rite of War.
Here we have 2,500 points of Loyalists Dark Angels running the Pride of the Legion Rite of War. To start, we have a Deathwing Legion Praetor in Cataphractite armor. He is running the Seneschal of the Keys Warlord trait. He has a Volkite Charger and a Paragon Blade. He is accompanied by a 5-man Dreadwing Command Squad in Cataphractite armor. All of them have been upgraded with Thunder Hammers. 3 of them have Combi Plasmas. 1 has a Combi Melter. The Standard Bearer is represented by the Watcher in the Dark with the Standard, and the model with the Combi Grenade Launcher. This unit will be entering the battle aboard a Land Raider Proteus carrier with the standard loadout. In our first Elite choice, we have a 5-man Inner Circle Knight Cenobium Order of the Broken Claws squad. 4 of them have been upgraded with Advex Moore's Greatswords, and the Preceptor has a Paragon Blade. They will also be entering play aboard a Land Raider Proteus carrier with standard loadout. For the second Elite slot is a Dreadwing Contemptor Dreadnought Talon. There are 2 Contemptors with identical loadouts, fielding Gravis Power Fists with inbuilt grav guns, and carries assault cannons. For our first compulsory troop choice, we have a 5-man Firewing Legion Terminator squad in Tartarus armor. 4 of the Terminators have twin lightning claws. The sergeant is wielding a chain fist and combi bolter. For our second troops choice, we have a 5-man Stormwing Legion Terminator squad in Tartarus armor. 1 has been upgraded with a chain fist. The other has been upgraded with a Reaper autocannon and lightning claw. The rest field power fists and combi bolters. In our fast attack slot, we have a 3-strong Ravenwing Proteus land speeder squadron. These have all been upgraded with multi-melters. Rounding off our force, we have a single Ironwind Sicaran upgraded with las cannon sponsons. That rounds up 2,500 points of Loyalists Dark Angels. And the layout for the board today, we've got some nice new scenery from Scrapescapes KL. It's a Tyranid themed board in honor of the new 40k, and we are using it for our 30k game today.
Deathguard deployment. So because I don't know where the objective markers are in this particular mission, I've kind of tried to balance out my deployment. Starting out on the right flank, I have a Leviathan to kind of serve as the anchor on that right-hand side. Next to him is a TAC squad, which can hopefully go and score relatively quickly. In the middle, we have the breachers that are going to take advantage of the center line of sight blocking terrain, and behind them we have the missiles, who will use this opportunity to move and shoot from behind cover later. Coming over further to my left, I have Typhus and his retinue in the Land Raider, and next to them we have the Contemptor Talon ready to support them. Hiding in this crater to hopefully get advantage of a little bit of cover, we have the Volkite squad, and last but not least, on my extreme left flank, we have a TAC squad that's ready to push up and hopefully capture some objectives quickly.
So for the Dark Angels deployment, we've started off with the Contemptors on the wing here, trying to counteract the other two Contemptors that are there, because it's really my only solution against them. Then we have a Land Raider filled with some Inner Knight Cenobium of the Broken Claw. They're going to be leading the charge. Again on the Contemptor side, because in theory they're good against Contemptors. Since we don't have enough Land Raiders, the Tartarus squad with the autocannon is in the back, using it as a mobile shield. The Lightning Claws have hidden behind the containers for the first turn. They don't need to be exposed to any of the shooting of the Deathguard. Our Sicaran is in the middle, doing some nice line of sights, hopefully. We'll see what they can see. Our command squad is in the other Land Raider, and they're on the other flank, trying to push up potentially for some other objectives on this side. And finally, the Ravenwing are on the side here in their land speeders, trying to push up the side and try and cause some havoc.
So Richard did not seize, so I do have the first turn. I did elect to have night fighting as well, so night fighting is in effect. It was successful. We have the 5 objective markers, which are now deployed on the table per the rules for the supply drop mission from Goonhammer. Here's one, which was placed by Richard, and it did scatter just a little bit more towards no man's land. Here's number 2, which started out directly behind the ruin on my side, but did scatter to its side just a bit. Here's number 3, which started outside of my zone, but managed to magically come back into my zone right next to a scoring unit. Here's number 4, which went way out of no man's land and back towards Richard, so that was actually pretty good for him. And then finally, number 5 comes all the way back over here, once again scattering directly back towards Richard and his Sicaran. A little bit of an uphill battle for me on a couple of these objectives, but we'll get started in just a moment. Turn 1 movement for the Deathguard, starting on my right flank. I'm very aggressive as I can be with the Leviathan because he wants to go challenge that objective marker as well as give somebody a hug. The Rhino is playing a little bit more cautious, trying to keep behind a bit of cover because we don't know what's going to happen with those speeders. The missile launchers, taking advantage of the Remorseless for the Deathguard, are moving and putting themselves in a position to shoot. The Breachers have decided to move up to set themselves up to score this objective in the next turn. The Land Raider shuffled a bit to its side to get some shots on its counterpart directly across, backed up by the other Contemptor with his las cannons. The Dual Grav Contemptor with his fist is moving up quite aggressively because he wants to be able to go fight the other Contemptors or perhaps Terminators. The Volkite don't really have very many good shots, and they couldn't really move to get good shots, so I've kind of left them where they're at. And then finally, the tac squad here on my left flank, because of the way the objective marker deviated back into my zone, I put them in a position to score it next turn as well. So we'll come back in just a moment with the shooting phase for the Deathguard turn 1. Shooting for the Deathguard started with the Leviathan. His storm cannon was just in range at the Land Raider directly opposite of him. Even with Sunder and Wrens and everything else, we did absolutely nothing. Didn't even scratch the paint. The Rhino behind him decided to just pop smoke to improve his chances. There was a bit more success here with the missiles, who popped out of cover, and they targeted the Dark Angel's Sakaran. And due to the Sunder, we were able to get through 4 hits on it, even with a couple cover saves from the Dark Angels, so that was a bit successful. My Land Raider took his shots at the other Land Raider from the Dark Angels directly across from him. We did manage to sneak 1 glancing hit through and take off a hull point. The Contemptor next to him with the las cannons was completely ineffectual and did absolutely nothing with the Dark Angels player passing his cover save. No shooting over here other than some pot shots from a couple of the Volkites that could actually see the enemy Contemptor, but it was only 1 wound and naturally it was saved on a 2-up. So other than the Rhinos popping smoke, not very effective turn 1.
Dark Angels turn 1 movement phase. That wasn't a very good start for us. We lost the Sikaran without it doing anything. 200 points, nicely down the drain there. My only Iron Wing. But the Raven Wing decided to zoom up the side, so they moved their full 16 to try and get their melter shots in the shooting phase off against the Leviathan. We need to start whittling some points away there. The Land Raider with the command squad, even though there's an objective directly in front of them, they're a bit too close for comfort for this Leviathan with a big siege claw. So we're going to try again, whittle some more points down with the las cannons here. There is no point in our lightning claws moving away from this objective just yet because they're about to score it in the next turn relatively safely. The other Land Raider did a sideways shuffle, a crab walk, to get some angles in, but also to provide cover for the other scoring Terminator squad in the back there. There's a lot of Volkite on this side. Even though they do have good armor saves, the weight of fire is kind of daunting. One of the Contemptors moved to try and give a selection of choices for the Deathguard Contemptor to choose whether going after the Land Raider or its counterpart. And then the final Contemptor really does need to come and eventually deal with the tactical squad over here. So that's one of their few scoring units. Getting rid of it would be very beneficial for us. Dark Angel shooting phase. It was a mixed bag here. We started off with the Contemptor on the side, targeting the empty Rhino, and as you can see, we did manage to blow it up. We glanced it to death after hitting it with the Grav, and then the Kerries finished it off. The other Contemptor took its shots at the other Dreadnought, and we managed to take 1 wound from the Contemptor. The Land Raider followed suit with its las cannons at the Contemptor, taking off another wound, so only sadly 2 wounds coming off this Contemptor. The Heavy Bolter did shoot at the Volkite, but was ineffective there. On the other flank, we were worried about the Leviathan, so both the Land Raider and the Speeders shot at the Leviathan there. The Leviathan chose to shoot back at the Speeders and took 2 wounds on the Speeders there, and in return the Leviathan only took a single wound. So mixed bag there, a lot of 1s were rolled, hopefully not a bad omen.
Turn 2 movement for the Deathguard. We are again aggressive with the Leviathan, moving straight towards his quarry, making sure to stay out of 12 inches of these speeders because I didn't want him to get some free movements. The the Rhino rumbled its way forward to be a mobile pillbox because we wound up with 2 of the scoring objectives coming back into this area. Actually, there's now 3 in this area due to the deviations. We did score 2 points at the beginning of the turn for controlling 2 objectives, so that was helpful. The Breachers decided to move their way towards the objective-rich area, but they could not get quite within scoring range of that scoring objective there. The missiles stayed still because they want to be able to just go ahead and shoot at the speeders. The Land Raider and the Contemptor shuffled to their right because when this Contemptor moved forward with my Grav, Rich played very aggressive and he advanced towards me with his Contemptor, so kind of put me in a position where I need to get some shots on him and do some wounds. The tax squad over here, after their taxi was blown up, they said discretion was the better part of valor, and they decided to run far away because they want to stay away from the Contemptor as long as they can. The Volkite are pretty much committed to their fate. They are standing still where they're at to try and get some shots and maybe squeeze off a couple wounds on the Contemptors. Turn 2 shooting for the Deathguard. We started out with the missile launchers, who decided to take some shots. Only 9 of them could see, but we could see the speeders over here on my right flank. We did manage to take 1 of them down. And then we moved over here to the Leviathan, who used his storm cannon, which was much less successful. I did only get 2 wounds through, and I really would have liked to have eliminated another speeder, but it is what it is. We took a pot shot with the Rhino at the speeders just to try and squeeze off that last wound, but it was completely ineffectual. Breachers had no shots. Coming over here to the middle, both the Land Raider and the Las Cannon Contemptor put all of their firepower into this Contemptor, getting off a couple wounds. My Contemptor fired his Grav as well, but was only successful in nothing. And then finally, we had the Volkite squad here, who after pouring 50 shots into that Contemptor, unfortunately, due to its hexagrammaton, we only managed to sneak 1 wound through. So that summarizes turn 2 shooting for the Deathguard. Not too great, but we'll see what happens in the assault phase. The only assault we had in turn 2 for the Deathguard was the Contemptor with claws crashing into his opponent. He took 2 wounds. His opponent only took 1, even after suffering 6 wounds, because this was the roll. So unfortunately, we did not accomplish anything there, but at least we stayed alive, and I'm sure it's going to be mutual destruction in just a moment.
Come on, Dreadwing.
No!
Dark Angels, turn 2 movement phase. So what we actually forgot is the land speeders needed to take a break check, which they failed on 11. They needed a 7 because of night and their leadership 8. They fled back 9 inches and then they rallied in my start of my movement phase. I moved the Land Raider forward and disembarked the command squad because there is a point right there that we need to start earning in this and to maybe give the Leviathan some choices of where it wishes to go. They also moved back the Leviathan. So Jason decided to shuffle slightly back to stay outside of the melter ranges of the Magnas inside the command squad. Then we also had the Lightning Claw Terminator Tartaruses there go over the terrain to try and get into scoring position for the next turn, if they're still around. On the other side of the board, we did another crab shuffle to the back to starting positions for the Land Raider, with our Terminators running in the back there because there are more objectives on this side of the board that we want to try and control. These Contemptors were stuck in combat, so nothing moved here. I did move my other Contemptor to try and approach the Volkites, but Jason, as a Deathguard, has 2 movement phase reactions, so he moved his Volkites back, sadly putting them outside of charge range, but still harassing them there. We'll see what happens in the shooting phase. Shooting for the Dark Angels. I think the luck gods have failed me after that last close combat phase. So we started off with the land speeders trying to snap shoot at the Leviathan. They had rerolls, but they managed to do 1 hit with the reroll and then didn't manage to wound. But in return, they got fired back by the Leviathan and lost the last one of their poor brethren, so there's only 1 land speeder left. Not a very effective unit there. The Land Raider shot everything it had at the Leviathan. Rolled 4 1s for the las cannons to hit. Thank God they weren't plasma.
Mortarion protects.
and the heavy bolter was equally as ineffective. We tried to just take some pot shots with the command squad at the back of the Rhino here that was exposed. Predictably, the dice were not with us and nothing really came out of that. The other Land Raider targeted its counterpart here, and predictably, you see no dice of wound markers or hull point markers on this Land Raider. Nothing was successful. We managed to not hit a single shot again.
Woohoo!
Searching for 4s, we rolled 3 1s and 1 3. These guys are locked in combat. The other Contemptor was the only successful, I'll say, thing in this phase. It shot its grav at the Deathguard Volkites. The grav did nothing because of the reroll ability on the heavy armor here. But we managed to get 2 rending shots from the carries in, which killed 2 of the guys who were in the crater who failed their cover saves. Remaining 2 were tanked on 2s by this sergeant here, standing all defiant in front of the Dark Angels. Combat phase was short and sweet. I struck first just because it was my turn there, even though we're the same initiative. I managed to hit 3 times and wound 3 times for 9 saves. Predictably, at least 1 was failed there. In return, the Death Guard swung back, managed to hit once, so a brutal 3 there, and I failed all 3. I needed to save 2 to let him survive, and as you can see, we both blew up. Nothing close enough to really matter, so mutual destruction for the Dreadnoughts there.
Turn 3 movement for the Death Guard. We didn't score any objectives, unfortunately, this turn. We started with Leviathan moving up, forcing many units of the DA to make a decision on how they wanted to react, and ultimately it was the Land Raider that elected to move forward, potentially blocking some line of sight and some charges off. The Death Guard Rhino here with the tac squad still inside only moved slightly forward. We did not get out of the Rhino on purpose because we didn't want to trigger a reaction, and I don't think the return would have been worth it on the bolters. But it does allow us to move up the breachers into range of this objective as well as range with their grav guns on the Land Raider should they decide to go that way. This Contemptor moved to its side 8 inches to try and get some shots off to draw a line of sight either to the command squad or to the Land Raider as necessary. The missile launchers repositioned themselves a little bit to be able to get some shots on a lot of different targets. The Land Raider with Typhon and his Death Shrouds inside basically repositioned a bit because I want to get las cannon shots on the opposite Land Raider. The tac squad over here as a scoring unit continued to try and run because they don't want anything to do with the Contemptor on our flank. While the 8 remaining members of the Volkite squad here have just steadily moved back, again probably keeping themselves out of charge range for at least 1 more turn, but allowing them to get some shots off. Turn 3 shooting Death Guard. We started with the Volkites here to tease out the shooting reaction. They unloaded 40 shots into the Dark Angel's Contemptor. We managed to sneak through 3 wounds successfully, but in the return fire with his carry's assault cannon and his grav, he managed to kill 3, including the sergeant. No shots from the attacks as they ran, so we came to the Land Raider. The Land Raider split his fire with 1 las cannon going into the enemy Land Raider and the heavy bolter and the other las cannon into the Tartarus Terminators. The net effect was we took 1 hull point off of the Land Raider and we killed a single Tartarus Terminator. Unfortunately, not enough to trigger a check. Coming here to the middle, the missile launchers sized up their target and they went ahead and shot at the Land Raider over here, managing to remove 2 hull points from glances and sunder. It was up to the breacher squad who fired their grav guns. They successfully landed both on target and they successfully got a hull point off with each, taking off the remaining 2 hull points and destroying the Land Raider. The Leviathan shot everything he had into the Tartarus. He did absolutely nothing. Even with the melta-gun that actually hit, the Tartarus passed the invulnerable save. The Rhino also popped off a couple shots at the Tartarus, doing nothing. Happy with the Land Raider going down, but would have liked to have killed a couple more of the Terminators. We did only get 1 other Terminator as well, as you can see over here. This came from my las cannon Contemptor. I could only spot 2. I hit with all 4. But lots of good invulns on the part of Rich, and only 1 of the command squad went down. Turn 3 assault for the Deathguard was short and sweet. We only had one charge, which was the Leviathan attempting to reach the Tartarus, but he just failed and he only surged forward 3 inches. No other combats this turn. We'll get back with the Dark Angels in just a moment.
Dark Angels, turn 3 movement. So we actually scored 2 points from the beginning and then we placed 2 new objectives. The first objective was placed actually back into the lines in the middle of his missile launcher squad. My new objective was actually deviated back into my lines, closer to my Terminators, which was good for me there. The Contemptor moved forward to try and get out of sight of the missile launchers there. We need to start trying to get into combat to do something with these guys. The Land Raider moved forward to disembark the Inner Knight Cenobium. There was a Leviathan, which worries me. It's really the only thing that's deadly against my units anymore. And these guys are Cenobium. The Cenobiums are Leviathan killers in theory. But he used his movement reaction to move backwards, so now he's actually outside of charge range. But he did put himself in charge range, potentially, of my command squad here, who have moved up. It's a terrain piece, so it's quite a lot for them to move. They're in cataphracti armor, but they'll be looking to get a charge off. The solo land speeder is really following the rest of his brethren into oblivion here because he moved into difficult terrain and he rolled a 1 for his difficult terrain check, which is just his luck, and suffered a hull point. Dark Angel shooting phase. We started off with the Contemptor shooting the Grav into the tactical squad. The Grav just was in range, actually managed to deviate into a better position, but managed to cause no wounds with the toughness check there. But the Carries was more successful, and the Carries killed the Sergeant and 2 of the other tactical squads. They had to take a break check, and they passed it on a 6.
Yes.
I really needed them to flee there.
We got lucky.
Then we shot the Heavy Bolter from the Land Raider at the Volkite squad. They lost a guy there, sadly not enough to take a break check.
Yep.
But whittling down that squad slowly but surely. A bit ineffective to do so, but why not? The Land Raider also shot one of its las cannons at the other Land Raider, managed to cause 1 glancing hit, so 1 hull point there.
Yep.
We're doing a plinking game, but there's still some danger inside that Land Raider we have to be aware of. We used the last las cannon shot to help with the destruction of the Rhino, because the Inner Knight Cenobium used their plasma casters to take 2 hull points off the Rhino there. So the third one disappeared from the lance cannon. They did manage to disembark because of the Deathguard's silly rules about not taking any difficult terrain checks. They all managed to successfully disembark. I hadn't surrounded this enough.
Indeed we did.
We shot the Melter into the back of the Leviathan, and for the first time, something actually worked from that.
Finally.
Land speeders, honestly. I don't even know what to do with these land speeders anymore. Retire them, maybe. And we decided not to take a shot with the command squad because there's only one guy who's eligible for charging, and I don't want any of the Melters or Flamers or storm cannons there to come and kill that lone guy.
Boo.
So we'll move into the assault phase next. So we decided to charge in with everything against the Leviathan. The land speeder went first because I wanted to take the Overwatch, and he did. Move. He did take the Overwatch, and he died to it. And then we needed a 7-inch roll, and we rolled a 10 to get the command squad in. The command squad came in, but since it was a disordered charge over difficult terrain, they were striking last. We lost 1 guy to the combat itself, and in return we only managed to do 1 wound from the Paragon Blade and 1 hit from the Paragon Blade, and 2 hits from the Thunderhammers, and he saved 2 of them, causing 1. We lost the combat by 1, and then we rolled an 11 on our morale check, so we are fleeing. And thankfully, we both rolled 5s on the sweep, so I did manage to get away.
Indeed, very lucky for both sides, I think. Turn 4 movement for the Deathguard. Just a points check. We're actually down 3-2 because we didn't score any objectives in the last turn. My remaining 4 Culverins here continue to move away from the Contemptor. I moved up my Land Raider here trying to see if I could perhaps get Typhon out finally, but Rich sneakily reacted and used his Land Raider to block my way, which was a very good move. My tack squad ran to get themselves all the way over here in cover and able to score that objective in the next turn. My missile launchers stayed still because they have some juicy targets with that strength 8 that they can actually use. I moved my Contemptor over just a bit because the fleeing command squad now becomes a very nice target for its las cannons. I moved my breachers and my tack squad further away because I don't want anything to do with those inner circle knight Cenobium. And I left my Leviathan exactly where he's at because he has a great opportunity to shoot a lot of stuff and to charge the Tartarus in the following turn. Turn 4 shooting for the Deathguard. We started with the remaining 4 Volkite Culverins, who once again shot at their hated foe, the Dark Angel's Contemptor. Once again, we snuck a wound through. We didn't take any return fire, so we're chipping away. The missile launchers here, along with the Nemesis Bolter on the Siege Breaker, they shot at the command squad that was up here. We did a lot of wounds, actually. We did 8 wounds. 1 regular armor save was failed, instant killing a single model.
And that was it.
The Contemptor fired next with its 4 las cannons. Rich declared a shroud with his command squad, but managed to pass all 3 of his invuln saves. We didn't kill anybody in the resulting fire. The breachers and the tack squad unloaded all of their bolters and bolt pistols into the Tartarus Terminators over here. We did manage to take one of them down from combined weight of fire. And then finally, the Leviathan had also shot all of its weapons into the Tartarus, killing another one of their number. But they did pass their break check, and we will go into the assault phase in just a moment. Turn 4 assault for the Deathguard. This was the only assault we had, which was the Leviathan comes crashing into the Tartarus Terminators. He didn't do any damage on the Hammer of Wrath, but his claw was very, very accurate, hitting 4 times, wounding 4 times, and with that brutal 3 took out the entire squad. The Dark Angel swung back. They did get a couple hits in, but they unfortunately was not able to wound the Leviathan. The one wound that did go through was passed on an invuln. So we'll move on to turn 4 for the DA in just a moment.
Turn 4 movement for the Dark Angels. We're in a bit of trouble here. We are leading 4-2 on the points, but we are down on troops, so cost of war might be significant there. We started off by ramming the Land Raider into the other Land Raider, and we both took a point off. I actually lost a side sponson las cannon, and he just had a whole point taken off. My Contemptor also moved forward towards the Land Raider, and he moved backwards in his movement phase reaction. The Tartarus squad moved up to the new objective that was placed after gaining the old one. It managed to stay close by. We're just trying to slowly whittle and accumulate some points here. The Inner Knight Cenobium were trying to approach the Leviathan, but he was fleeing like a baby, even though he's encased in all that armor. So he moved backwards there with the second movement phase reaction. The command squad actually rallied there, so they rallied, and there's not much they can do, but they're going to try and move forward in the next turn and see maybe get something out of it. Turn 4 shooting. We started with our Land Raider, targeting the Deathguard Land Raider with the las cannon. As you can see, it was ineffective. Even with Sunder, we weren't able to glance anything or penetrate the opposing Land Raider. The heavy bolter targeted the Volkite squad. Again, even with Twin Linked, that was ineffective as they did pass their saves. We had our Contemptor Dreadnought also try and take some hull points off with the Grav, but the Grav deviated too far away to be effective, and we couldn't get any rendings on the Kerry's assault cannon. The Inner Knight Cenobium were too far for their template weapons to be effective, but also we didn't want to be getting any return fire from the Leviathan. And our last remaining Tartarus squad decided not to shoot at anything because they needed to stay on the point, and once again the possibility of return fire wasn't something we wanted to take. Assault phase. So we had a very long charge for the Inner Knight Cenobium against the Leviathan, and we decided to take it because we needed to do that. We were very lucky there because the overwatch from the Leviathan actually caused no wounds. There was some fantastic invulnerable saves from the knights to not take any. Another ineffective charge from the Contemptor on the other side towards the Land Raider there, so only surging up 3 inches. The dice are not boding well for the Dark Angels.
Turn 5, the final turn for the game. We did score 1 objective at the beginning, so the score is currently 3-4 to the Dark Angels. We shuffled around the Volkites to try and once again kill that Contemptor. We moved the Land Raider a bit so that I have choices on who to shoot. Missile launchers have some options here as well. The Breachers moved this direction to try and get grab on that Contemptor. We moved this tack squad, we moved this Contemptor. Basically everything is doing its best to get shots on the Inner Circle Knights, along with this tack squad here. Leviathan shuffled back just a little bit because Rich can score an objective in the bottom half of his turn. So it made sense for me to try and contest this last objective over here. So comes down to the shooting really. We'll see what happens in just a minute. Turn 5 shooting, the final shooting for the Deathguard. The Volkite Culverins once again tried to shoot at the Contemptor. We didn't do any wounds this time whatsoever. The missile launchers up here, 8 of them could spot the enemy Land Raider, and we finally took off the last hull point with Sunder. The Land Raider opened up with everything into that Contemptor, but we still only managed to kill 1 wound, and it still had 1 wound left. It was up to the Breachers, who fired off their grab, scoring 2 successful hits, and they managed to take off the final wound off of the Contemptor, destroying him.
Just move and shoot, Malaki.
We love it, we love it. It now came over to this side of the table, and everything is trying to kill those Inner Circle Knights Cenobium. We started with a Contemptor with 4 las cannon shots. Didn't actually kill anything. We started with an attack squad over here. Fired 33 bolter shots. I think we did 1 wound. We have a attack squad back here that fired off a couple shots. Again, didn't really do anything. It came down to the Leviathan. The Leviathan opened up with all of the firepower that he had, but thanks to some great invuln rolls from Rich, we only managed to actually kill 1 guy, and the net result of all this shooting is there's 2 other wounded Inner Circle Knights.
Turn 5 for the Dark Angels is the last turn. In the last turn, we actually scored the end of the turn. So what we did is we moved the Tartarus up just to consolidate. There's not really much else they can do at this point in time. We actually moved the command squad up, and as a reaction, the Leviathan decided to come and approach them and charge them down.
Come at me, bro.
They're actually in range if they manage to kill this Leviathan somehow this turn to score at the end of the turn. And with that in mind, we came up with the Inner Knights Cenobium here to do the very same thing and try and help those guys out. The Deathguard reacted to that, and they decided the fleeing is the better part of valor here. They've been fleeing all game into their backlines, into their safety of their dangerous terrain. So we're moving on to the shooting phase for the last turn of the game. Assault phase for the Dark Angels. We decided not to shoot in our last turn because we didn't want to take another round of fire from a Leviathan Dreadnought. We did charge in, and we charged in first with our Inner Cenobium Knights, and they actually lost a guy to all that fire, which wasn't too bad, and they managed to successfully get in, but it was disordered, so they were losing their attack, and they were going last. The other command squad charged in as well. They went first, but since they have Thunderhammers, the Thunderhammers didn't get to strike. The Paragon Blade managed to hit 3 times with no wounds at all, so
very lucky for me.
Ineffective as all. It came back with the Leviathan hitting all against the command squad, which was smart, getting rid of the scoring. Caused 3 brutal 3 wounds. We lost the command squad themselves, but the Praetor managed to save his 3 invulnerables on a 4+. So he was still alive.
Very, very lucky.
The Inner Cenobium Knights, as you can see, were ineffective going against the Leviathan. Surprisingly, the Leviathan managed to save one of his Brutals 2s there with 2 6s. Indeed. And, well, then we lost the combat by a lot, forcing us to take a break check. The Warlord passed, but the Inner Cenobium Knights rolled a 12 on their leadership.
Yes.
So they fled. They couldn't be chased because they're still in combat, but it's the last turn, so they counter-destroyed.
Indeed.
We'll be back with the summary and roundup and man of the match. So that's the game. Now, I enjoyed that a lot, even though luck really wasn't with me today.
Yeah, the Goonhammer missions are really nice. As we said in the intro, I really like playing those. It's definitely well thought out. It's a different style of game because there's a lot more objectives and special rules and things like this. Yeah, it was a very enjoyable game, and you actually did a much better job of controlling objectives than I did.
Yeah, so for once I actually played the mission in the sense trying to get the objectives, and the fun random nature of the objectives as you got one, you placed one, and it allowed you to kind of dictate where it was. And I was happy with the way I did it because at the end of the game, just scoring objectives, the score was 5-3. Mm-hmm. But really where I lost it, because I had such an elite force and lost so much of it, the cost of war is really what cost me there.
Yes, so I actually noticed probably by turn 3 that getting objectives was going to be really hard for me because everything just for some reason kept deviating back towards you. Everything on my side, with the exception of one, kept deviating towards you. So at that point I needed to kill some stuff. And I kind of tried to focus on that. But yeah, if not for the fact that I killed more things, you would have actually taken the game because you were really doing a great job with objectives.
Yeah. The last turn, the fleeing of my Inner Knight Cenobium, that really was telling because that was actually a very expensive unit that, since it's fleeing at the end, counts as destroyed. Rolling a 12 on a leadership 9, oh, that was rough. That was rough.
I got a frown on that one because that was unexpected.
So I think it might have been a bit closer if that hadn't have happened, but I had lost quite a lot of my units by the end of it. The transports themselves being quite expensive, the Land Raiders. I lost my Sicaran the first turn without firing a shot.
Yes, indeed.
And I'll say that I was disappointed with the Land Speeders, the Proteus Land Speeders there. They were relatively expensive in my opinion for very little work done. Actually, even very little ability to do work there.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate that the Proteus land speeders have kind of been nerfed a little bit, and that's why everybody takes javelins. I agree with you for the points. They didn't really put in much work at all.
Yeah. So, but no, all in all, very enjoyable game. I hope you guys enjoyed it. We're doing the 30K in 30 minutes a bit more now. It's a little more accessible for everybody.
Especially for me. If you watched me try to move everything around one-handed, you would pull your hair out by the end of a 2 or 3 hour bat rep. So that's why we're doing the 30K in 30 minutes right now.
Yeah. So, but then, even though the Deathguard won, we also have the man of the match. Mm-hmm. So who's your man of the match?
I got to pick the Levy. I mean, a Levy is, everybody would say that's the obvious choice, but the reason why I picked the Levy is he somehow managed to survive not 1, but 2 charges from the command squad with Thunderhammers. Also the Inner Circle Knight Cenobium, he managed to take it and break them. And then he was also doing a bit of shooting all over the place, whether it was killing a speeder or different things. So I got to give it to the Levy. He really put in a lot of work this game.
I got to agree with you. He did a lot of work there. He was a significant thing I couldn't ignore, especially with the way I was positioned. He controlled the board there. Getting rid of my lightning claws was quite painful. There was really very little they could do against him. I don't know, hard to play against the Levy if you don't have a Levy in return. In this, it's very much like the other walkers. If you don't have walkers to counter the walkers, it's hard to do. So I'll agree with you there. I didn't like seeing him on my side of the board for so long. He wouldn't die. My dice rolling was also appalling, trying to kill him.
Yes.
I think with a bit more luck, he might not have been there as long as he had. But the fact that he really was the telling part of the game there, destroying that side of the table for me.
Sure.
So my man of the match, I had a few to choose from, to be honest, because I had the one Tartarus standard Terminator squad with the autocannon, who actually did probably the most of the legwork in scoring there, but really not much else. My Inner Cenobian Knights, I was really excited to see those come in action, but they flopped due to dice rolling, but also just the way you play them, the way I played them there. The most exciting person for me was actually my Contemptor, who didn't last very long, but went off in a blaze of glory. And the fact he actually lasted as long as he did was the surprising factor. Saving all of those brutal saves, keeping me in the fight. It could have turned a lot faster for me in the negative direction if I'd lost him at the beginning.
I think he deserves a promotion to Leviathan himself. But yeah, no, I agree with you. He really did take a lot of punishment and did a great job. Punched well above his weight class. Typhon never got out of my Land Raider. I tried to actually point him at the Inner Circle Knights, and you cut me off with a Land Raider blocking my way. So I promise everybody I was trying to get him into combat. It just was not happening.
I know how deadly he can be in close combat, and my Inner Circle Knights there, they're not designed to go after something like that. I wanted to see them doing their prime, going after some walkers. Sadly, the walkers on this side were destroyed themselves, and the Leviathan on the other side was just a bit too elusive to get into combat before the end of the game.
He was a sneaky Leviathan for sure.
Yes, I needed to see some more fearlessness. I think with the show no fear, they shouldn't be allowed any reactions for this. But no. Well, look, that's all from us at Far East Wargaming today. I really do hope you enjoyed this. We enjoyed bringing it to you.
Yep.
If we've made any mistakes that you noticed, please feel free to comment in the descriptions. We want to try and make this better. We want to have this back and forth. We're going to keep bringing you battle reports, the 30K in 30 minutes. Also, we are planning some longer battle reports in the coming days. And other content, such as our weekly podcast. We're doing the army reviews and anything new that Games Workshop does release for Heresy. We try and touch base with it. So please like and subscribe to get notified when our next videos come out. But from me, Richard, at Far East Wargaming, thank you for tuning in.
And from me, Jason, as always, happy wargaming.